Today's form drawing exercise is the last variation we're going to do of the form we created in exercise 24, and it has 4 sets of loops, 2 sets of loops to the side, 2 sets of loops at the top, 2 sets of loops at the other side, and 2 sets of loops at the bottom. So this is what it looks like. We start off by creating a loop at the side, diagonally across, down, creating a loop, and then we rise steeply diagonally, and then we come back down and create a loop, and then we create a rounding and come in and create a loop, and then cross over and create a loop, and then diagonally down, create a loop, and then cross over, come up and create a loop, and then we're rounding back up and meet with the line where we started. So when we want to create our second line, we start under the first loop, and I would just do like a little loop here, and then we create our rounding, come back into the form, and then we create our loop and cross over and create a loop, and then diagonally down where we create a loop and then cross over and create a loop, and then we create another rounding, come back up into the form and create a rounding, a loop, sorry, and then another loop. Oops, these 2 loops cross over each other, and then diagonally up and create a loop, and then we meet up with the line where we started. So as you can see, this loop was in way too far in. It should have actually been out here, and then the form would have been better. I'll maybe draw it up again with this graphite. It's a little bit darker, and so you can see what's going on, and in the process I'll correct this loop so it's it looks nice. So we're over here, we're starting off with our loop, then crossing over, creating a loop, and then we diagonally up, rising quite steeply, create a loop, and then we cross over, come down and create a loop, and then this is where we've got our rounding. We come round, and here I want to adjust my loop because it was way too far. So here I'm creating my loop. I've moved the loop, as you can see, so it's now out here, and then I'm crossing over, creating a loop, and then diagonally down, creating a loop, and then crossing over, creating a loop, and then rounding and meeting up with my line. So that's my line. Then we start here by creating a rounding or the loop. I mean, you can start wherever you want really, and then creating a loop, and then crossing over and creating a loop, and diagonally down and creating a loop, and then up to create a loop, and then we're rounding, and then we come in and we create a loop and come down and create a loop. So this is a bit of a mess down here, as you can see, and then up to create a loop, and down to create a loop, and then we're meeting up with our line. What I'm talking about being a mess is this, because it sort of has some light lines behind, but I hope you can see what's going on. I'll maybe just use a blue crayon, and we'll go through the form again, and hopefully it maybe makes it a little bit easier to see the 2 different lines. But as usual, you know, per usual, you just go over your form and you adjust your lines so that they look right. So we start off with the blue crayon, and we create our loop, and then cross over, create our loop, and here we're slowing down, and then we can speed up here, and then we're slowing down in our loops. So here we're slowing down, and then you can go a bit faster here. And now we've kind of placed our loops okay now, so here we slow down, and then you go a bit faster when you go down, and you slow down in your loops here, and here you can kind of follow the swing of the curve around. So That's the first line. And then the second line, we'll draw that with red. So here we've got the red coming round and we're creating our first loop. And then we're slowing down in a loop, and then we're speeding up when we go down and then creating a loop. And we're just going slow in the loop part here. And then we can kind of speed up again in the rounding. And then we slow down when we get into the loop section. And then speed up in the release. And then we slow down again in the bind and the loop section. And we meet up with our line, so we're back to where we started. So that's the two separate lines. I'll give you a couple of quick tips for how you can construct this form with a few help lines. So the help lines that I want to show you look like this. What you do is you create a loop, and the first loop that you create has to be sort of above this section here, this pointy section. So here we start off by creating our loop, and then we come down and create our loop, and then we follow the line up and create our loop, and then we come down and create our loop, and then we go round the form. This is where we are rounding, and then we come down, and here we want to create a loop down, and then we diagonally up and create our loop, and then we catch the line as we come down, and we create a loop here below, and then we rise up inside and create a loop, and then we come round and we meet up with our first line. So we've used two of the diagonal sides, and then if we want to use, and now we want to use the other two here, well, what we want to do is we'll start below the first loop here, and we'll start by creating a rounding, and then we come in to our form, and I can see those loops have been placed a little bit too close, and then we create a loop here, so the loop's going to overlap slightly. Then we catch the line coming down, the diagonal line, and then we're creating a loop, and then rising back up into the form, creating our loop, and then coming around the form and back in and up to create a loop, and then crossing down, creating our loop, and here we're catching the last diagonal line, leading us up to create a loop, and then down to create a loop, and then we're finished. So I'm hoping that this might be a slight help. I might just draw this. So this is the blue. This is the first line. It's that's where we're using it, was the blue, and then the second line, this is where the second line should come. This is where you should use your second line. They should follow the red lines. So you've got your, and then of course my loops have overlapped. So, you go over your form, adjust it, and then always making sure that you're doing it in a fluid motion. And then here, I'm going into the blue line and then crossing over, making a loop, crossing over, following round. So first loop, second loop, blue line, and up into a loop and down into a loop, and then rounding, creating a loop, crossing over, creating a loop, using the blue line, and then creating a loop, then up, creating a loop, and rounding, and back where we started. And then the second line, we're creating a rounding. I'm making it slightly smaller because that way it fits with this one here. So creating my rounding, coming down into a loop, and then rising up into a loop, and then I'm going over my red line, and then down into a loop, up into a loop, and then rounding, and then rising and creating a loop, and coming down to create a loop, and then I'm following the red line up into a loop, diagonally across, creating my loop, and back where I started this line. So I hope this makes sense as one set of help lines. You might find that certainly this is good if you want to use these lines. It will help you position your loops so they're sort of right. If your sides tend to get too big, as mine sometimes do, and particularly on the right side you have a tendency to make them too big, then what you could do is you could create a square box. So you just create a square box in which you would want your form to appear with it, and then you would work within your box, and that will naturally make you stop and make you think, oh, okay, I shouldn't go out beyond my square box. So that's another way of creating this form so it doesn't grow out of proportion, so to speak. And then you can also, as we've done previously, create these lines where you have these straight lines that run down through where you want to place your loops, and that ensures that your loops, like mine, doesn't end up sitting too close together, because you then work with trying to hit the straight lines. So if you were doing the straight lines, I wouldn't maybe do the sides in the form. I would just try and work with placing some straight lines, 4 sets of straight lines, and then work your form around those like we have done. If you're unsure how to do that, then you can go and look at some of the previous videos I've done where we've used the straight lines as helps for how to construct our loops. That's all for this week's Form Drawing Friday. I'll be back next week with a new exercise for you, where we'll be starting a whole new set of form drawing exercises that are taking us away from these ones. So hopefully I'll see you next week.